Last time we talked, we were discovering and learning about construct validity at a deeper level. And one of the things we reviewed were the different forms that operational definitions can take. One of the primary ones we focused on were self-report measures or surveys. And these are a very popular way of collecting data in psychology. And therefore, I think it's worth digging in a little bit more to understand how that happens. Now, we also talked about observational methods, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So you can see our objectives here for both survey research and observational research, and I'm going to skip through this, although you can pause and read, because these are also listed at the beginning of the module. So a survey is, as I'm sure you know, a method of collecting information by posing questions to individuals. We can do this in a lot of different ways. We can do door-to-door. We can do it over the phone. We can now do it online, which is an extremely popular and effective way to gather information. And what's nice about it is you can ask people just about anything. Commonly, we ask people about their attitudes towards given topics, maybe how often they've engaged in a particular behavior. The field of personality and the measurement of personality traits is based on survey data or questionnaire data or self-report data. And so it's really popular. Ever since the surveys were introduced in psychology, they've only gotten more and more popular, and it's clear to see why. It's relatively low cost. It is efficient from a time perspective, meaning you can gather a lot of information very quickly, as opposed to doing something like an experiment, which would take longer. You can ask about anything that you want to ask about, so there's really no limits or hardly any limits in that sense. And so it seems like a really great tool. And as a consumer of research, of course, most of, I would guess, the information you see being reported on your Twitter feed or news networks probably comes from some survey or questionnaire of some kind. And so I think it's important as both a producer and a consumer of research to understand how survey research works. I think one of the misconceptions that students have, especially when they're producing research, and maybe a question that consumers don't ask themselves when they're reading about research based on surveys, is that surveys, while they seem easy to do, are actually in practice very difficult to do well. It seems easy because all you have to do is like put together a couple questions and have people answer them, and like you're in business, and that's not going to take a lot of effort and it's not going to take a lot of time. I've had a lot of undergraduates in my years of I'm just going to put together a survey real quick and do that. And we have to have the talk about why that actually is a lot harder than you think it is. Remember, in psychology and in the sort of construct validity sense, we are trying to get accurate, reliable, and valid measures about behaviors or attitudes or thoughts or whatever it is. There's a lot of things in a survey question, in the ordering of questions, in how you answer them, that can influence the answer such that you're not actually measuring what you think you are, which makes it not reliable and then makes it not valid. So you could put together a quick survey, but my guess is it's not going to be very useful to you. And the process of making a survey can sometimes take months or years to do it well because there's a lot of testing and retesting and pilot testing going on. So we could run a whole class on how to do surveys, and people do. This is a job that people have if this interests you. But in this class, because we have so much other stuff to cover, we're not going to do that. However, I am going to hit the high points here of the things that I think are essential to know when either trying to conduct survey research or reading about survey research. As I was just hinting about, there are many advantages of using surveys. So as we've talked about in the class, if your goal as a researcher is to make a frequency claim or an association claim, survey data or self-report data are the way to go. You could do it other ways, but this would be the simplest and most straightforward way to do. And for many researchers, making those kinds of claims is extremely important. And so this is a great way to do that. Assuming that your data is collected on a representative sample, we'll talk more about that in the next chapter, it's likely to be generalizable. That is, it has high external validity. So you have a better chance of arguing that the results you found or the connection you found or the frequency data you reported actually exists beyond the sample you studied, but in the population more broadly. That's really appealing for a lot of researchers to have that ability to do that. And I think what's also nice is it helps us understand naturally occurring relationships between variables. We're not getting people into labs in somewhat artificial or contrived settings where maybe they're behaving different, but we're just asking them on their own, do you do these kinds of things, and measuring them about how people behave in the real world. Now, of course, we know that correlations and association claims cannot establish causality, but we also know that this is an important first step, that you have to have an association first before you can claim causality. And so this is obviously an essential part of the research trajectory, and so surveys are playing a very important role in that. However, the extent to which surveys lead to meaningful data is based on how well the survey is constructed and how the questions are asked. And as I was talking about earlier, there are many pitfalls and ways that this can go wrong very quickly when you're putting together a survey. So this is something you have to do carefully, very thoughtfully, very meticulously. Because if you're not doing it that way, then the data you're going to get are not going to be worth anything. So if you're going to do a survey, it makes sense to do it right. So what we'll do in the next few slides here is talk about some of the high points and some of the general principles of survey construction, survey wording, and dealing with how people view surveys that are an initial set of points to think about as you would conduct a survey, construct a survey, or if you're reading a headline about a survey, these are questions you sort of want to ask yourself about the survey and try to find information on before you would go believing a claim full-throatedly.